Hey, this is John from Alloy 211. A slight disclaimer before I even start the video. Always ensure that you're firing the correct ammunition out of a firearm that it was designed for and the correct caliber. It is always imperative that you as the shooter know that you are firing the correct ammunition out of the firearm that is designed to be fired out of. And I want to say that before I get into this, and you'll probably understand it in a minute, just as some people, some people's kids, you never know what they're going to do. So, today's video, I wanted to find out, will a Sig P228 9mm magazine, which is this right here, function in a Sig P229 and .40 caliber, which this is the magazine for that right here. And the reason why I wondered this is because a factory Sig magazine for a P229 runs between $30 and $40, and that's kind of expensive for a magazine. And I don't have that many magazines for my Sig P229, which is right here. And I wanted to get more, at least more for the range. And I have two good Sig magazines. I have one aftermarket magazine, which I'm not even going to get out because it is junk. I think is advertised to hold 13 rounds, and if you put more than 8 in it, it refuses to function. So, I'm not even going to bring that aftermarket magazine up here because it's so junk. But this is a good magazine, this P228 magazine here. And you can find these, as opposed to the $30 to $40 for this, for say $16 to $20. And that's quite a bit cheaper. You can buy two magazines, two of these P228 9mm magazines, for the cost of one of these 12-round .40 caliber magazines. And I'd wondered this for a while, and I looked a couple different places. I couldn't really find any sort of confirmation on as to whether this would work or not. So finally, I just bought two of these magazines. So, and I'm not made of money, obviously, so I can't afford to just go and spend $70 on two of these magazines, whereas I can afford to spend $30 some. Well, I think it ended up being about $40 with shipping for two of these magazines. The one thing I did find, one of the things I should note early on, this magazine only holds 10 rounds compared to the 12 that the .40 magazines hold. And the reason behind this I'll get into in a moment. Now, the reason why you can use the P228 magazine and the P229 is because it's the same frame. So, as they're very similar firearms. I'm not going to get into the minutia of it, but the frame is the same. So, theoretically, it will fit. And if you've ever done this before, I know I have. I've loaded .40 into 9mm magazines and 9mm into .40 just to see if it would work. One, to see how people could get confused and do that, and two, just because I'm curious. I'm a curious guy, and things fascinate me, so I will check things out. Now, going through, and I won't get into all the specifics of the difference in dimensions between the 9mm and the .40 magazine, as there are only two that I really felt were significant, and that is the difference in width and the difference in feed lip length. Now, most of the dimensions came in within about a 32nd of an inch of each other, but on the width, the .40 caliber magazine is 0.86 wide, at least at its widest point, whereas the 9mm magazine is 0.8. So this is about 7/8 of an inch wide across, whereas this is about 13/16 wide. And that's why this only holds 10 rounds, compared to the 12 rounds that this holds. Now, the other thing that kind of concerned me, actually, let's get the up here so you can kind of see, pull a light over. I'm actually sitting down to do this video. I normally stand up, but I thought, what, today I'm going to sit down. But the feed lips are slightly shorter on the 9mm magazine. So at first, and I did all my measurement comparisons between this newer generation P229 magazine and this P228 magazine. Now, my P229, and I should say this as well, was made in the mid-90s. So maybe for newer P229s this may not hold true, but for this one, it does. The 9mm magazine does fit inside this firearm. Now, the one thing I had noticed, like I said, was the feed lip difference. So one thing, two things, a few things, three things, four things, five things. But the feed lips on the 90s era P229 magazine are actually the same length as they are on the P228 magazine. So that became a lot less concerning to me. Now, I have not actually fired the gun with the magazines in it yet. I'm going to do that hopefully in the next couple days and make a bit of a video of that to make sure that they function when firing, because firing is a lot different than just manually functioning the firearm. Now, when I manually function the firearm, it loaded and extracted just fine. That's just running it by hand, not actually firing it. So when you actually fire a gun, things are a lot different than just manually cycling it. You know, things move faster. You know, is this spring going to keep up? Is this spring going to have too much pressure? I don't know. I won't know until I actually fire it. But, oh, and here's a little trick that I use to keep the gun flat, or any gun, is I weight down the trigger guard. Otherwise, or the trigger guard, weight down the magazine wall. Otherwise, you end up with this thing. Let's do on that, and that just doesn't, it looks bad. It looks bad. And these are 9x18 rounds, which, if you didn't know, 9x19 and 9x18, they all fit wonderfully on 7 or 5.56 stripper clips. So anyway, I wouldn't ever have a bullet inside a firearm in a video, and I had none in the chamber, but these do work well as a weight. So anyway, we'll do a little fitment. Well, a little fitment. I will show you what difference it makes that the 9mm magazine is slightly narrower than the 40. Go ahead and put the 40 mag in. Now, as you can see, hopefully, it fits right as it should. And you know, it's kind of hard to show that, but it's got no wobble between there. Now, you put the 9mm magazine in. 9mm magazine is in. Again, sits in there just like it should. Everything seems to function correctly. Now, the one thing is that it is narrower, so it does have a slight bit of sideways movement. Not enough that it interferes with anything, but that might be enough to make it so it jams when you fire it. And you know, that's again how when you're doing it manually, things are a lot different than when you're actually firing it, because when you're doing it manually, the movement on this is pretty minimal. Whereas if you're actually firing and you have the force and the quick application of force, it can definitely cause more movements, or just different movements than you'd expect, or than you would get when you're doing it manually. But as you can see, otherwise fits. And now, I don't have any dummy 40 caliber rounds made up, so I am not going to do any function, even manual function testing here at the bench, or table. It's a table. It's not a bench. It's a table. Because I just feel it's kind of unsafe. But I can tell you, because I've already done it, it does function. So in the next couple days, hopefully I'll be going out and shooting and actually seeing if this functions in it, which if it does, this would be a really viable alternative to the 229 mags. The one thing I will say is, if you're going to buy these magazines and they do function, I would, where it says P228 here, 9mm, I would obliterate that and put a 40 caliber, or at least obliterate the 8, make that a 9, and then obliterate the 9mm and just take an etch 40 caliber in there, or just obliterate it, you know, just so people won't try to put 9mm in here. Because as I said, it is imperative that you fire the correct firearm, or fire the correct cartridge out of the firearm is designed for. There was another interesting thing I noticed, and this was more interesting to me because of the difference between these two magazines, in that the actual magazine body on the newer P229 magazines are just slightly longer, just a little bit. But when I compared it to the mid-90s production magazine, it is just about the same. I mean, just about the same. So it's interesting to me how many more similarities there are between this earlier production magazine and this later production magazine. And it does kind of make me wonder if these magazines will still work in a later 229, which I don't know, because I don't have a later 229. I have an earlier 229, and I don't really feel a need to buy a newer one because I already have an older one. But like I said, in the next few days, I'm going to hopefully actually do some shooting with it and see how it functions. And, you know, if it does, then this really will be a good alternative to the pricier 40 caliber magazines. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative, and stay tuned and we'll see if they work. Thanks. Have a good day. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you watched some of my other videos and you like those too, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Thanks.